right, here we are. First day of sentence completion. I keep wanting to call it correction, but that's a different thing, isn't it? Same theories. Grammar is going to be important. Okay? Now, these first few videos are going to be a little bit longer because I'm going to have to go over stuff, but let's see. The most important thing you're going to have to do is look at the answers first. It's counterintuitive, but the answers are your friends. Okay? So you look at the answers, and what we're going to do is we're going to find the negative answers. Okay? Now, ignored. And there's a very good criteria for negative answers. All you have to do is decide, is it bad or is it good? And of course, there's neutral answers, which are neither good nor bad. Okay? And there's another type of negative answer, but we're going to go over that later. Now, the obviously negative answers here are what? Let's take a look. Ignored. I don't want to be ignored. Do I want to be eliminated? No. Decrease. Do I want to be decreased? Well, not really. That's not really a negative. But instead of doing that, let's erase all that crap, and we'll just underline the negative. Okay? Do I want this? Do I want to be eliminated? No. Do I want to be ignored? They're definitely negatives. Okay? Now, do I want to be decreased? Decrease is a negative. Okay? But now here, what we have to realize is that decrease means to go down. Okay? And that's what I've termed a directional negative. Okay? So anything that's lessens or decreases or something like that is going to be a directional negative. It's still considered a negative. Obviously, if I decrease pain, that's a good thing. Okay? But still, it's directional negative because you're subtracting something. Okay? Or lessening it. Okay? So we got two true negatives. Ignored is a true negative. Eliminated really is not a true negative. It's a directional negative. Although it does work with the I don't want to be eliminated kind of thing. Okay? So we got three negatives. So what do we want to do here then? We've got two columns. We know that negative, positive is an issue in each column. So the first thing we want to do is decide in these blanks is decide, hey, do I need a negative or a positive? Okay? And if we can do that, it becomes very easy. Let me eliminate, decrease. Nonviolent demonstrations often create such tensions that a community that has constantly refused, and we got to notice negatives in the sentence, refused is a negative, to something, its injustices, is forced to correct them. Pronouns are going to be important too. Okay, so we have to correct them. What is them referring to? It's referring to injustices. Okay? The injustices can not be, no longer be is the same as not. So no longer be, and this is going to be important, a colon. So again, they refer to the injustices. So injustices can no longer be, okay? That's a question. Now, we want to work backwards also. I like to do the second blank first, okay? So the injustices can no longer be, we can no longer ignore them. That's okay. Verified doesn't make sense. Accepted is okay. The injustice can no longer be eliminated. That doesn't work. Discussed, that's stupid. It's probably going to be ignored or accepted. They're similar in meaning, okay? Now, acknowledge or tolerate. Okay? Acknowledge, ignore are opposites. Okay? If I see two direct opposites, I got to think, I love that answer. I love answer A. Okay? Now, let's see if it makes sense. Okay? And it could be C, so let's see. Nonviolent demonstrations often create such tensions that a community that has constantly refused to acknowledge its injustices, so they refuse to acknowledge them, is forced now to correct them. They can no longer be ignored, so therefore they must be not ignored. See, the injustices not ignored must be positive, okay? So they must be tolerated or acknowledged. Acknowledge makes sense, doesn't it? Has constantly refused to tolerate its injustices? Well, if they refuse to tolerate them, that means that doesn't make sense, does it? If they don't tolerate them, then they can't be forced to correct them, okay? If they don't tolerate them, they don't exist, okay? So our answer is A. Now, what gives A away? Negative answers are better than positive answers. Negatives are confusing. Okay, we know that from reading. If you took reading, if you didn't, then know that now. Okay, so if I'm guessing, which I do in these questions, I like to guess. I'll usually go with go with the negative answers. Okay. Now, notice address, add, eliminate. They seem like opposites, but they're really not. Okay, to address something is not to add. Okay, it's just to look at it or something like that. Okay, but acknowledge, ignore, direct opposites. If I see direct opposites, I'm going to choose them. If I see double negatives, I'm going to choose them. Okay, if I'm guessing. But that's without looking at the sentence. You'll see how well that works or doesn't work later. Okay, so let's move on to number 2. Now, again, what are we going to do first? We're going to look at the answer choices. Okay, negatives. Dismissal is a negative. Okay. Disapproval is a negative. Indifference sounds like a neutral, but it's a negative. Approbation is approval. Okay? So we got 3 negatives. Okay? But what do we notice? Okay? What we notice here, I notice, is that adoration and approbation, it's not always going to be negative, although I'd like the negatives. Adoration and approbation are similar. Okay? Approval, adore. Okay? Now, we have time words after that. Precursor means to come before. Contemporary means like now. Okay? And we notice we have a time issue here. So I love these 2 answers. This is, again, my rule of 2. Just as before, we had a rule of 2 here with what? Ignored and accepted, because they both made sense. But it's not as obvious here. Okay? The rule of 2 is much more obvious here. 2 similar things, approval and adoration, approbation and adoration. And then we have disapproval, the opposite. And then we have contemporary and precursor time issues related to 1813. Okay? Now, let's see what happens. Do they come before or are they at the same time? Okay? That's the question, isn't it? Okay, since 1813, reaction to Jane Austen's novels has oscillated. What does oscillate mean? Oscillate is like this, like an oscilloscope. So go back and forth. So between A and B. Okay? Question is, this needs to be positive? Because condescension, if you look in the Korean dictionary, condescension is going to be a kind of positive thing. Maybe. Okay? Condescending is it's rude, actually. Okay? It's to lower yourself when you don't really feel like it. You're just pretending to be at somebody's level when you know you're higher. Okay? So it's like kind of like in Korean it would be like 잘 났어. All right? So it's oscillating between what? Sorry for you non-Korean speakers. It's oscillating between A and B, which is what? It's got to be positive. So what can we immediately get rid of? It's got to be either B or E. Okay? Now, this whole thing doesn't matter anymore. We have to decide, is it contemporaries or precursors? Because these are all out. Okay? But in general, what does it say? Time weight. Later writers have esteemed her works more highly than did most of her precursors. That doesn't make sense. Precursor is somebody who comes before you. But how could somebody come before her esteem her works? It's impossible, isn't it? So we got to go with, at the same time, contemporaries. Okay? All right. We got that done. Okay? Just keep following and you'll get the hang of this. It seems a little awkward at first, but as you get used to it, you'll be unreal at this.